The House of Commons returns from its summer break tomorrow, with rebel Conservatives vowing to join opposition parties in attempting to block a no-deal Brexit. In an interview with the Sunday Times, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson said colleagues had to choose between his vision or allowing Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn to take over. Now, the threat of deselection as Conservative candidates was left open. Well, joining us now is Bloomberg's UK politics reporter Jess Shankleman. Also still with us, Simon Derrick from BNY Mellon and Danae Kyriakopoulou from UMFIF. Jess, great to have you on the programme. Look, when you look at the concerns, first of all, so Boris Johnson is basically telling his rebels to fall into line, or else will they say what he, will they do what he says?
Well, this is absolutely the crux of what's happening this week. It could go three ways. Boris Johnson could win, and by Friday he could have thwarted any attempt to block no deal, or he could have lost and the Labour Party will have won, or we could be also heading for a general election. So Boris Johnson absolutely has to do everything in his power to convince that small group of potential rebels, people like former Chancellor Philip Hammond, former Justice Minister David Gauke, to back him. And he's tried being nice. Last week they said, look, we're really, really close to getting a deal with the EU. This week they're using the whip and they're saying, if you don't back us, then you could potentially lose your seat.
But what is Boris Johnson's view? Does he actually want a no-deal Brexit if that's the only way to deliver on October 31st?
Boris Johnson wants to deliver Brexit, and he said he will do that with or without a deal. And so he's pushing really, really hard on one side to get a deal. That means he's playing up the prospects of a deal with Brussels. Michel Barnier yesterday wrote an article in the Sunday Telegraph saying, actually, we're not so optimistic about a deal. But from the UK government side, they're really trying to show that a deal is possible. And Boris Johnson is saying to those Tory rebels, if you vote against us, you're wrecking any chance of that. And he doesn't want to leave without a deal, but he's saying that he will do if that's the case. There are, however, people in his government who do want to leave without a deal.
One more politics question, then we'll go on to the economy and the markets. What are the chances of success for the people that don't want a no deal? It seems that Parliament actually is much more divided than maybe we thought, although we'll find out more this week.
Right. So based on what's happened earlier this year, it looks like there is quite a high chance of success, because we know that there is a majority in Parliament to thwart no deal. So at the moment, what we're waiting for is the wording from Labour. What will that statement be tomorrow that they're going to put to Parliament? And what we understand is they're trying to make it as vague as possible in terms of a time extension for Brexit, to allow as many people as possible to be able to back it.
Simon, I have a great chart. This is like the Derrick chart. It's looking at the crisis of confidence. UK consumer sentiment hitting a 6-year low. We had some pretty dire August manufacturing PMI. I mean, is it just Brexit uncertainty? So if the Brexit uncertainty is removed, do we go back to normal?
No, because I think that we are in an economy that's been slowing steadily. And it's not just about what happens here with Brexit, but we've got global growth slowing. So even without this, I think you would still have downward pressure. But look, you go out on the any high streets at the moment, and it feels as though there's tumbleweed blowing down it. It feels as though there is a recession already here. So Brexit uncertainty is not going to go anytime soon. So I think that downward pressure on the economy, downward pressure on rates, downward pressure on the pound is going to continue.
If there's a no-deal Brexit, I don't know whether there's a probability of a no deal at 70% or whether it's 50%. What does the Bank of England do? I mean, there were, people saying, well, it becomes like an emerging market because you have to, because of, it gives a shock to the economy, then you lower rates, but then because of inflation, you have to hike them pretty quickly.
Yeah, it will be a very difficult position that the Bank of England will be in. I think it could go either way. Boris Johnson has locked himself in a difficult position by making it all about the backstop. On the one hand, that means that other elements of the deal could be more acceptable to his party, but Europe has been very clear that they would prefer no deal to adjusting the backstop. Now, I think if we were going to go down that route, yes, it is not all about Brexit. There's downward pressure on the economy that's coming from other areas as well, but a 6-year low in consumer confidence, that is very much driven by Brexit. And I think the Bank of England would be in a difficult position in terms of having to ease on the one hand to support the economy, but let's not forget that inflation is its primary goal and target.
What happens to pound in all of this?
So First of all, I think that coming out of summer recess, you always get a pickup in volatility. More than any other summer recess, end of summer recess, that's going to come back. I think that what really going to end up focusing on these few weeks is when the general election, which almost certainly seems to be coming along, actually takes place, before or after Brexit, because I think that matters when people are talking about what the outcome will be. And looking at the way Sterling performs ahead of elections, it's usually very volatile. Think about 2010.
Yeah, so what is the election? And it does seem that Boris Johnson is preparing for an election, Jess. Is it before or after a no-deal Brexit? If it's before, we have to find out in the next 2 days.
Right, and what we're looking at the moment this week is whether Brexit is actually even going to take place on 31st of October. Boris Johnson is fighting as hard as he can to make sure that he does, but it looks like those opponents want to have an extension of a few months.